once you commit internally to something, everything else around you starts to bend to that will. And I noticed that because I was still on the fence of trying to do the agency thing, but I was still interviewing for jobs and I wasn't getting any clients on the new agency front, and I wasn't landing a position that I wanted, and because I wasn't motivated or passionate about it. But once I kind of made that switch of, yo, I'm gonna try to build an agency, everything else started to just flow. What's up, y'all? I'm Brian Fitch, host of the podcast Heavy on Brand, powered by the Carbon Thread Agency. And we hope you get something out of this when it comes to like your marketing and building a business and leveraging content and creative and marketing and all the things to kind of help grow your mission, grow your purpose, grow your passion. So I'm glad that y'all have joined us. So we're also in Arizona right now. So this is our first ever official team retreat. We come together a lot for client work, and we've been traveling a lot as a team. I want to say over the past 2 years, I can't even keep track of all the cities and the countries that we've been able to visit together as a crew. But one of the things that has been really, really important for me is for us to carve out time to just focus on us as a team, as an agency. And it's not even really about doing more work. It's about just connecting. And so we came out to Arizona, we rented a nice house, and we've just been kind of hanging out. We've been shooting some content. We've been shooting the podcast, but we've just been kicking it, man, building relationships with each other. It's even more important for me. Building client relationships is obviously needed, but continuously building relationships with the team and the partners that we have at the table, I think is just as important, if not more. So we also have, the team, many of you can't see, but have Justin, Morgan, and Vince. We got some people in the house somewhere. So we're just having a conversation about kind of the beginnings of CT. And so if you hear people asking questions off camera, I promise you I'm not talking to myself.
And you're not looking at the camera.
And I'm not looking at the camera. So just so that you all know and get it.
How did CT begin if it wasn't always the plan?
Yeah, so CT wasn't the plan. But CT was built because I literally had no other choice, at least a choice that I was comfortable with, right? So you all know this, but for people who are just trying to understand how long we've been around and, why does a person decide to start an agency one day? And I think I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. It's one of those things I actually got from my mom, I feel like. She was always a hustler and always just thinking of ideas and things of that nature. And so my very first attempt at entrepreneurship came in a number of different fashions actually before coming to CT. So I was a part of a startup trying to get that up and going with some co-founders. And then prior to CT, I was actually a part of another social media agency where I had partners in that as well. But the whole time, until we got to the point of where I was actually not working full time. I had a gig. I had a full-time job, corporate situation. I was working at a bank, working in the strategy department and all that good stuff. But I just always had this itch that I felt like I needed to scratch of the dream of getting out on my own and running a business, running a company. I just always felt like I never fit in when I worked in corporate. I felt like there were certain instances where I did extremely well, but in many ways, I almost felt like I was a fish out of water, oftentimes. And so, you try a lot of different things when you're kind of in that headspace, and you look at different opportunities. You talk to all kind of people, and you just try to figure out, all right, well, what about this, or how can I carve out my own lane? And, you come across different opportunities that you decide to really go after. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But either way, it's always a positive thing from a standpoint of you're guaranteed to learn something out of these experiences.
You said you had to create CT because there was no other option. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, so in the business that I was in before CT, like I mentioned, it was a social media agency in which I was a partner in, right? And so this was probably the first entrepreneurial success I had been connected to. And so when I left corporate to do this thing full time, we had gotten a few clients and we were starting to kind of grow the business a little bit. About a year into that business, there was starting to be friction. And it was starting to be a situation where we weren't seeing eye to eye on where to take the business and how we were trying to grow. We had different principles and different, ideas around where we needed to go with the company itself. And unfortunately, it got to a point where, I had 2 partners in this business and there were 3 of us. And I literally found myself being the odd man out. I woke up to an email one day and it was like, yo, we no longer want your part of the business. There was really no heads up around it. It was a situation of, I wake up to an email and it literally says, we no longer want you a part of the business and we feel like we should go in a different direction. So as you can imagine, that can be a soul crushing thing because there's so many things that are connected to being in partnership with other people and to running a business that is 100%, your livelihood. So to have that snatched from up under you, literally, it makes you do a ton of self-reflection to try and identify and figure out, well, how did I get in this situation? And so when I say I had no other choice, of course, when something like that happens and you no longer have any money coming in or whatever it may be, you either have 2 options. You either have to go back and get another job and go down that path, or you try and start something else. So the very first thing I did was start reaching out to people, and I'm bypassing a lot of stuff because it actually became a whole legal situation. But I still needed to make money. I still needed to earn a living. I still had people that relied on me, right? And so my first instinct was let me try to find a job, right? And nothing really worked out. And then I probably went on maybe 1 or 2, maybe even 3 job interviews. And I think they could tell I wasn't in it. And then I think the last straw for me was the position that I held before I left banking. A headhunter reached out to me that actually filled or put me into that position before. Said, hey, I don't know what you're up to now, but I noticed that, you work for the same leader that you worked for a few years ago. Where are you at in your journey? And this, that, and the third. And I told them kind of the situation that I was in, and they told me the compensation package, and it was well into all in 200,000 to 300,000 a year or something like that. I can't remember. You think about benefits, incentives, salary, and all that good stuff. To not have anything coming in, I remember thinking damn, I could really use that, but I wasn't passionate about it. I just couldn't. The thought of me going into another situation like that again made me sick to my stomach. But I knew I wasn't just making a decision for myself because at the time, my wife, now girlfriend at the time, she was moving down, right? And I'm like, yo, I can't have you come down here and my whole situation is in flux. And I told her, I said, don't come down here. Don't come down here. And she was like, yeah, that ain't happening. I'm still coming. I already got a job now. It's too late. And so that puts a lot of pressure on you. And, when we have a conversation around well, this is the situation that I'm in, I say, I got an offer kind of sitting on the table and this is what they're offering. And for me not to have anything coming in, I'm thinking of taking it. And she was like, don't do it. You're going to be miserable. Literally what she said. We were sitting in the kitchen of a 1-bedroom apartment. She was like, yo, the only thing you're going to do is just come home, say what's up to me, and then you're going to go back out to a coffee shop. Because that was my routine when I was working and trying to build the other business, or even when I had a full-time job, I would spend my free time trying to build another business. And I did that for years, just hacking away at it, trying to make it happen. And so she knew that was the thing that I was going to do. And so when we were having that conversation, I was so, what's the word I'm looking for? I was so upset about the situation that I was dealing with partners, right? I was kind of over the idea of actually starting another agency, but it was always one of those things in the back of my mind. I'm like, well, if all else fails, I can do this. because I had already done it to some degree, right? But when I had that conversation with my wife, and once I released that burden of having to get a job and having to take this position because it's paying a lot of money, then I immediately was like, you know what? It's all in on the agency. I'm gonna start my own thing and I'm gonna just figure it out. Right. And so that's how all that started. I came up with the name. People always ask me, why'd you come up with that name? And it's not anything prophetic or sophisticated. It was like, for whatever reason, I like the sound of the word carbon. And then I'm like, all right, what can I make up to connect the dots, right? Going back to the whole idea of connecting the dots, that's where the thread comes in. And then I remember the first few times I told that story, I made it sound a lot more sophisticated than that. And they were like, oh yeah, like that's dope. I'm like, yeah, I just pulled that out of my ass. But it stuck, and I didn't want that to be a barrier of me not starting, because I had to start. My back was against the wall. Like, it was a lot of stuff kind of connected to how this needed to be and how successful this needed to be. And so once I kind of made that switch, it's interesting how the universe works. Once you commit internally to something, everything else around you starts to bend to that will. And I noticed that because I was still on the fence of trying to do the agency thing, but I was still interviewing for jobs, and I wasn't getting any clients on the new agency front, and I wasn't landing a position that I wanted, and because I wasn't motivated or passionate about it. But once I kind of made that switch of, I'm gonna try to build an agency, everything else started to just flow. And once I made that decision, it was probably, I don't know, maybe like 2-3 weeks later, we landed our first client, and it was like a small project. It was a website deal, but it gave me so much pride and joy, where I was like, damn. I saw that QuickBooks notification come in after I sent out that first invoice, and I was like, this is it. This is it. And I just never looked back, and I just started to rely on what I knew how to do best, what I knew my strong suits were, and that was like connecting the dots, talking to people, building relationships. So I just went all in, man. I just went all in, and I just never looked back. Anybody that was willing to have a conversation with me about what we did or what I did at the time, I was down. And even with that first project that we got in, like, I didn't make any money off of that for real. Like, I sold the project without having the person that was going to fulfill it. Like, it was a website and I didn't have a developer, right? And so I went out and I found a developer, and the developer ended up I ended up paying him maybe like 70-80% of that budget, but I just wanted the case study. I didn't care about making a whole bunch of money. I just knew I just needed to build that momentum and that confidence to say, like, I can really do this. And then once that happened, then the next thing happens. Then the next thing happens. You just start to build up that momentum and that confidence along the way. And again, it was like anybody who was willing to talk about what we did and how we could help them, it was just a conversation. And I would just show up. I can't tell you how many deals I lost from being overexcited to talk about the things that we do and to talk about all the latest and greatest trends in marketing. I can't tell you how many people had looked at me in a glazed over fashion because I was just word vomiting stuff. And I learned the hard way, like just failing in public or failing in front of people or standing up in front of a group of people and not being able to communicate your message clearly, and you just kind of lose folks. Like I had to go through those struggles because it was different, and it was more, just as much as it was me refining the pitch, it was also the exercise of me rebuilding my confidence. Because when you get kicked out of something like that, it rocks your identity in a way to where it's like, damn, I'm not good enough. And you got to work through that conversation and that self-talk to try to get back to a point where you have confidence to do it again. And so I know that was a long-winded answer.
That was a great answer.
Yeah, that was a long-winded answer. But yeah, that's literally how it went down.
So once, I guess, Did you have to develop your confidence back before you started rebuilding the team? Because what's obvious in future episodes is that CT, the Carbon Thread, is no longer just you.
Yeah.
You know, you have a whole team now.
Yeah.
So I guess what was the process of rebuilding a team, getting partnerships again, and kind of now with this experience that you had, rebuilding a trust amongst people around you?
So what I did to kind of rebuild that trust and that muscle with like what it takes to build a team coming off of like that situation I was in, because it changes you in a way. I just knew kind of two things. One, I needed to be extremely transparent about the people that I was working with. I would let people know exactly where I stood and what they could potentially have to work through in working with me because of the history. Like, look, this is the situation I'm coming out of. This is how I look at things right now. And I think maybe only one or two other people really wanted to partner with me on a deep level, but I would just let people know, like, yo, I'm not in the space to do that mentally, right? Because that could be something that could be negative or non-beneficial to both that person and myself. So I was just extremely honest about where I was. And then the second piece is I had to have some level, it's funny, this is kind of contradictory, but some of the people that end up coming on the CT were just, I just found them, right? And so I didn't have any relationship with them, but through their actions and their consistency and how they showed up, like over time, built up a ton of trust with me. But the other part of it too was I needed to, for other people, I was very, very slow to bring on, and they needed to come in by way of either a referral, or I at least had to have some sort of relationship with you at first, because I needed to understand your character. And I think that was a blind spot. No, it wasn't a blind spot. I think that was something that I had ignored previously by overlooking certain character flaws and tendencies and thinking like, oh, well, this person would never do X, Y, and Z because of the history connected to it. And there were clear signs. I mean, it was clear as day. And so if I started to pick up on some of those signs now, I can spot it and I can course correct pretty quickly so that I'm not caught in a situation where I have to build from scratch again.
Oh, that takes a lot of self-awareness, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I was just being honest. Yeah. I was just being honest. And it was just stuff, I would like to think I have a decent level of like EQ. And I think in situations where you're dealing with a lot of money with other people, it can, if you allow it to, it can mask the things that you really need to pay attention towards. And so once I got over the idea or stopped caring about a ton of money and having money at the center of like what it is that I was trying to do, like we needed to vibe on a different level. It needed to be more character alignment than anything else. Because I always felt like once I started to rebuild, I always felt like the money would come. I just had to keep showing up. That's what I kept telling myself. Even though it was tough, even though I wasn't confident all the time, even though, there were other external things happening connected to that, I was like, yo, I gotta stay consistent with this. And staying consistent doesn't just show up only in like popping open your laptop every day. It's like my whole lifestyle had to change. It had to change where like everything of what I did on a day-to-day basis needed to be somewhat structured. I had to build up a habit and a muscle because those were things that I kind of got away from previously because of how we were doing things. And I just kind of went back to the basics, man. I really did. It put me in the mindset of like what I was doing to kind of get ready for hooping in college in the off season. It was like that kind of mode and that kind of grind for me at the time.
Speaking of that, do you think you are a former college athlete? Speaking of like that mentality, do you think there are traits that you took from being an athlete that almost helped you kind of restart and rebuild?
I think everything, how to work with people, how to have a short memory, the discipline to show up day in, day out. And it's easier to do that when you have other people that you consider teammates, because you're really not showing up for yourself when you play. I hooped, I played basketball, so you have 10, 11, 12 other people that count on you to show up in a certain way. Then you start to recognize that it's not really about you, it's about the next person, right? So there was so many aspects of me being involved in sports that was crucial to me being able to sustain, because I felt a lot of the same discomfort when trying to build the business that I felt when trying to make it to the next level in hooping or training or whatever it may be. It was extremely uncomfortable. Like, it's just no other way to put it. It sucked. It sucked at times. So I just leaned into that. And just try to keep telling myself, like, yo, this is only temporary. But that temporary could be a long ass time. So, but thankfully I had a support system, because without that, without my wife, without my friends, without my family, I just couldn't have sustained that. You got to have people kind of rooting for you. And you got to still be willing to show up for other folks, even when you feel like you're in the dumps. People notice that, man. People notice that. Like, oh, you only come around when things are good. And no one ever said that, but we all know people like that. When they're up, then that's when you see a whole lot of them. But when they're down, you don't see them. Like, I never wanted to be that person. Because one thing that situation reinforced for me was the importance of relationships. And when you have genuine relationships in your circle and the people that you've been rocking with for like years and years on end, then in many ways you need to lean into that even more, because that's help. It's helping you feed your soul and to kind of keep you going, because they know you. And if you don't have that, man, what you got? What you got? What I want people to take away from the Heavy on Brand podcast is we want to simplify what it means to do marketing in today's environment. So a lot of the topics that we talk about on each episode, they get tactical, and that's on purpose, because we want people to listen to this information and feel like they can go implement it right away. But then it also gives people an inside look as to what it means to work with an agency and what it means to build a close relationship with an agency. Because when you get so deeply involved in helping a brand shape their narrative and making sure that their mission is heard by the people and is seen by the people that really matter and the people that they're trying to get in front of, you got to have a deep relationship with them. And the other part about it is, we don't want anyone, and we've all been guilty of this. I've been guilty of it. The reason why we called it Heavy on Brand is that we want people to focus on like the realness behind like their companies and why they exist, and like all the ugliness that comes along with it. Because in many cases, that's the stuff that your audience connects with. Like, people are tired of seeing overly done things. Things that are done that are too polished. Like, there's a time and place for a lot of that. But a lot of this stuff is peeling back the layers of what it means, the good, the bad, the uglies of running a business and trying to grow. And when I started Carbon Thread, I knew that, we would work with a big brand, no doubt, if it made sense. But it's also important for us to really be able to have an impact for those companies that are in growth mode, because we know we can really help them move the needle because we've done it. And we want people to feel like if they're going to bring an agency on board, that they're bringing on a team that has literally been in their shoes and can really advise them, not from a place of theory, but from a place of actual practice. And so that was a big thing, or a big component to why it was important for us to get this podcast up and going. And I wanted everybody to see what I get to see from my team on a day-to-day basis. We have some really phenomenal people that have joined in the mission and joined in the collaboration of what we're doing. And I'm just only a piece of it. Like when I look at everybody around the room, and I understand their skill sets, and I understand like the things that they've been able to do, I just want to share that with more people. I want them to experience what I've been able to experience over the past handful of years with like building a dope ass team and really trusting in that, and really hopefully, illuminating like what it takes to do that. But again, rocking with a crew of people that has been where they're trying to go and have been where they are. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the Heavy on Brand podcast. I'm sure it gave you a little bit of insight into how I think, where things began, what we're trying to do at the agency. Hopefully you get a ton of value out of this. And I'm just looking forward to just connecting with more people through this. We're here to help and support brands, companies who are really trying to make a difference with the stories that they're telling. And so if you want to keep up with us more, visit our website, thecarbonthread.com, and connect with us on IG, YouTube. It's all at The Carbon Thread. And we just appreciate you in advance for willing to just take a moment, an ounce of your time to listen to what we had to say. I think you'll get a lot out of it. So appreciate you. Appreciate everyone tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the Heavy on Brand podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. And if you need more information on all things marketing and branding, check us out at thecarbonthread.com. Until next time, stay heavy.